Gabrielle Jackson is a generational strategist, author, and millennial coach. She's the president and founder of the Millennial Solution, a next-generation consulting group empowering leaders to optimize their millennial talent and equipping them to excel in their personal and professional lives. As a millennial herself, Gabrielle uses her personal experience to make her teaching interactive and practical as she reaches out to youth leaders. She's also the Director of External Partnerships at the Institute for Faith, Work, and Economics, a nonprofit think tank based in the DC metro area. She is also the Development Director at Write Progress, a one-stop hub for millennial-age writers to learn and write about current events, share their editorial opinions, and access top research through an intuitive, personalized, and simple web platform. As a former legislative staff member for a state senator in California, Gabrielle understands what it is like to work under high-pressure situations and how to be an effective member of a political team. Gabrielle is the author of 5 Millennial Myths, the handbook for managing and motivating millennials. It provides techniques for managers and millennials to bridge the generation gap and resolve their frustration amongst managers who believe that millennials may be disloyal, entitled, unmotivated, and addicted to technology. Gabrielle is an active community member and serves as the Millennial Engagement Chair for the Fairfax County Republican Engagement Committee. She was also recently crowned Miss Fairfax County, United States 2014. Gabrielle earned a Bachelor of Arts in Public Policy from William Jessup University and a Master of Arts in Government from Regent University. Please join me in welcoming Gabrielle Jackson.
That was wonderful. Remind me to shorten up my bio. I was getting a little bored back there. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Good. So I just want to first congratulate each and every one of you for coming here this summer. You are about to be on an incredible experience or ride of your life. So prepare for this summer to be one of the best summers of your entire lives. Take every moment, embrace it, and really build upon it. I really appreciated the last presentation of being able to understand how you stand out as an intern. You're here as a representative not only of yourself, but also of your families, of where you've come from back home, but also of your future self, of where you want to be as well. Every single summer, thousands upon thousands of interns descend upon DC. It's DC Central. Everywhere you look, there's an intern somewhere climbing up the ladder, trying to get themselves ahead, trying to pursue their hopes and their dreams. But what we're going to do today is we're going to give you the tips, the techniques, and the tools for you to be able to stand out so that you're going to do well, excel, and exceed all expectations set for yourself. So this morning we're going to be talking about what it looks like to be successful in your dad's world. By that I mean not only as a young woman coming into a world dominated by men, but also a world dominated by older generations. As an intern, you're most likely going to be the youngest person in the office. I can tell you from personal experience what it's like to come in and you look around and nobody really looks like you. Or everyone who does look like you is fetching coffee right next to you, right? So you're going to be entering a workforce that many of you maybe have not experienced before. You're coming from colleges and from universities, from homes and from schools where you're surrounded by your colleagues, where everyone looks and acts and talks just like you. But in order to be successful, in order to be taken seriously, you need to understand the environment that you're going into. So just like for any of you who have maybe traveled abroad, gone to other countries, or maybe moved around quite a bit, you understand that before you go somewhere, you need to be able to understand the culture. And so that's what we're going to give you this morning, is be able to understand the culture, the right language, the customs, the techniques, so that you can really do well at this job and the many jobs in the future. So first, we're going to be giving, looks like some of the pictures didn't come in, so just use your imaginations, because I know all of you have wonderful imaginations of the great pictures that are involved in my presentation this morning. So what we're going to be talking about is who are the different generations. And is everyone okay? Can everyone hear me? I'm incredibly tall, and this is not just tall enough. It's just not working. Plus, I have like 4-inch heels on. So anyway. So what we're looking at is the Millennial Generation. So each and every one of you are a member of the Millennial Generation. And you can't go online today. You can't turn on the TV without someone talking about who are these millennials. So I'm a millennial coach. I help millennials be able to understand what makes them passionate and be able to connect their personal passions with their career. But inevitably, anytime I speak, the number one question someone asks is, what's a millennial? And then the number 2 question is, oh, what's wrong with you guys? So we are here to be able to exceed expectations that are set before us. So who are millennials? There are those that are born between 1980 and 2000. So that's, I'm assuming, each and every one of you here. So we are a generation unlike any other generation. We are also called first globals. We're really the first global generation. Because of technology, we're able to connect with people all over the world. I'm sure if you go on your Facebook friends list right now, you've got friends in other countries who are traveling abroad. We're constantly connected with people all over the world, not only through technology, but also through the relationships that we have. We are incredibly diverse. We're one of the most diverse generations here in the United States ever. And we really appreciate diversity. We really celebrate that. I used to joke around with people that I'd get a little freaked out if I walked into a room and everybody looked exactly like me. But then as I started getting into that, I was like, actually, being a redhead, there's less than 2% of the world that's natural redhead. So I see some of you are out there. Yeah, there's like this affinity. Don't ask. But it'd be a little freaky, actually, if I walked into a room full of redheads. It'd be like a ginger convention, or Irish, anyway. So looking out, we're incredibly diverse. We really appreciate that diversity as well. We're the largest generation of the planet, and there's a lot of pride that we take in us as a generation. I think that we naturally know that we're going to go out and make a difference, but many of us just don't know what that difference actually is. And so there's 80 million of us right now in the United States. And marketers, job recruiters, managers, they're all incredibly aware of how large this next generation is. And everyone's trying to vie for our attention. They're trying to capture our dollars. They're trying to capture our skills and our talents. They're trying to capture our talent. And frankly, they're just trying to capture us because we're constantly moving around. We're really a Renaissance generation. How many of you, when you decided to come here this summer, were like, well, I could, sure, I could spend the summer in Washington, D.C., but I could also, go to horseback riding camp, or I could also, play sports over the summer, or I could also go to Europe. I mean, we have so many options. We're incredibly blessed as a generation that sometimes it's almost a little overwhelming, right? Where you're like, I don't really know what I want to be when I grow up. It's that like quarter-life crisis, what am I doing with myself? And so we've got so many options before us. And so what I want to help us do is understand who we are as a generation, be empowered by that, and let that knowledge be something that you can use as a platform to really be an ambassador for yourself and your generation, as well as understand who the other generations are to be able to do well with them as well. Well, you're just going to have to take my word for it that there was a really funny meme. So what do the other generations actually look at when they see this generation? So this is from Time Magazine. About 2 years ago, and they were calling us the me generation. So who knows what the word of last year was according to Webster? Selfie, right? Selfie was the word of the year last year, and the only reason I know that is because my boomer mother, who's like really into taking selfies, and it's really embarrassing. I'm like, please stop posting them on my Facebook. But the reality is that there's a perception out there in the workforce today that millennials are incredibly self-obsessed. And I think sometimes, I'm honest with many people, managers that I work with, that I say that I think that there's a heightened self-awareness of who we are, not only us individually, but also as a generation. But I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that we need to learn how to capture that and do well with that and say, yes, I'm proud of myself. So think about it with Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Facebook is really just like your own website completely dedicated to yourself with your pictures, things that inspire you, things that reflect you. So we realize that we have a platform because of technology to be able to express ourselves. Because although there are 80 million of us in the United States, I think one of our biggest fears is that we're just like everybody else. We know that we're special because we've been told that we're special, right? I mean, how many of us had parents, we're blessed with parents, mentors, coaches who recognized us as individuals and said, I really believe in you. You're going to change the world. You're going to do amazing things. You can do this. Anything you want to do, you're going to do successful at. So we're empowered by that information and by that motivation. And sometimes it comes across as entitled, as pushy, as something that is not necessarily our heart, but we need to learn how to express that in a positive way. And so we're going to be talking about that this morning as well. So we're going to be discussing who the generations are at work right now. So right now we're at this incredible juncture, and that we've got essentially 3 generations working together at the same time. And that really hasn't happened before. The reason is that we're not only the largest generation coming up, we're also the highest educated generation. Right now, there are more full-time individuals who have MBAs than those who are working full-time who've never gone to college. We're incredibly smart, we're talented, we're gifted, because most of us are told by our parents, by our teachers, by those in our lives that said, well, you really should go to college. The question wasn't whether or not you should go, it was what college to go to. I'm a first-generation college graduate. Are there any other first-generation college graduates out there? There's a couple of you. So most of us, our parents went to college, and it was like, that's just what you do. For my parents never thought about going to college, but for me, it was, they never sat me down and said, Gabrielle, you should really pursue education. But I did, and I'm the first in my family to graduate, and the first in all of my extended family to go and get my master's. That wasn't necessarily my parents sitting me down, that was just culture and society encouraging me to go and to get an education as well. So we're incredibly educated, we're coming up and we're wanting to have, we want to be taken seriously in the workforce, right? We've gone to college where the average college student debt is about $35,000 coming out of it. We paid a lot of money for this education that we've received. And we want to get a good job when we graduate because we were told that that's why you go to college, right? Well, we've also got this older generation, the boomer generation, which is also the largest generation, just second to us, and they're not retiring like those that have gone before them. The average retirement age was about 57 6 years ago. Now it's 64. My mom is 67 years old, and she went back to college. She is now starting another career, and so she's entering the workforce, and she's realizing how competitive it is as well. And so now we've got not only one generation or two generations, we've now got three and potentially even four. There's still some traditionalists out there that are the older, probably your grandparents and maybe great-grandparents, that are still in the workforce as well because they're living longer. Because boomers, as we'll talk about later, is their priorities are work. They feel very fulfilled when they're at work. And so it's not like they're stubborn, like, I'm not going anywhere. Most of their passion and their motivation has been this career that they've worked really hard to build. And so you need to understand that that's a priority that they have as well. And then right in between, so we've got 1980 to 2000 are millennials. And then from 1965 to 1979 are the Generation X generation. And I often think of like Cher from Clueless. Did anyone else watch Clueless growing up? As if. Totally my favorite movie. But that's a lot of what you think of when you think of Generation X, right? Kind of grungy, you know, running to grunge music. Many of them were latchkey children, so they're very independent and not used to working with others as well. So looking at who the generations are in the workforce, being able to recognize that each one has their own communication styles, their own definition of success, their own definition of work, and being able to recognize that. So if you get nothing else from my talk, squint really hard. We're going to go over this, but this is what I want to have each of you come away, because these are really the practical ways that you can understand how the generations work. So we're going to start up with the Traditionalist Generation. I'm going to walk over here if that's okay. The Traditionalist Generation, not many of them are going to be in the workforce, but maybe some of them are going to be your bosses, right? They're going to be the congressmen, they're going to be the heads of the organizations that maybe you're working with. So understanding where they're coming from. The priorities of the Traditionalists, those born between 1922, microphone comes out. We are so high-tech over here. Wonderful, thank you. 1922 to 1945, and priorities for Traditionalists is hard work. Volunteerism. If you think about it, they were the generation that were raised right after the Greatest Generation, that World War II generation, and for them they really prioritized building a home life. They went in and they stayed with their career for 25 years. They got married to their high school sweetheart. They started bowling leagues and they started elk clubs, and they really had a strong sense of community. So for them, keeping things as local as possible is encouraging to them. It's a priority for them, and it's something that really invigorates them as well. They also really respect sacrifice and duty before fun. There's this sense of duty, like I said, volunteerism, patriotism is also a very strong motivator for this generation as well. The priorities of a baby boomer generation is, right here according to the study, they're called workaholics. I don't know how many of you have boomer parents, but if your parents are anything like mine, they sacrificed so much to be able to give back to my sister and I. They sacrificed going on vacation with us. They sacrificed things for themselves so that we could get ahead. But they were really focused on doing well at work. My parents are serial entrepreneurs, so it's kind of this joke in my family that now I'm 25 and I finally started my own company. They were like, Gabrielle, we were starting to worry that we brought the wrong kid home from the hospital, because it's like, got to start a business anytime soon, because both of my parents had started businesses by the time they were 22, 23. My sister, who's 29, started her first business at 14, so they're just incredibly entrepreneurial. But it eventually caught up to me. But boomers are prone to be workaholics, working hard. They prioritize processes, right? So many of them climbed up the career ladder. Many of you who are going to be working with women who are boomers are going to recognize that many of them are just saying, you got to pay your dues. This is how it works, honey. It's hard work and you got to work your way up. So for boomers looking at this next generation as millennials who are excited, we want to get in. We're like, I've got all these great ideas, right? And I'm going to run up to the top and I'm going to tell you that this is how you can improve things, or this is an idea that I had, or maybe this is something that my friends and I were thinking about, or this is something that I learned about in my college course. For you, the intention is pure to be able to communicate that to your boss. But for them, they might see that as a threat of, well, what does she know? How long has she been here on the job? She's only been here 6 months, or she's only been here a year. She's just a junior level associate. So for them, they'll say, well, I remember how hard it was for me to get here, and she needs to understand that there's a process. Well, things are changing. Work looks different today than it did 20, 30, even 50 years ago. Even 5 years ago, it looks a lot different. So understand that I don't want to discourage you to do that. I want to encourage you to do that. Think creatively, think entrepreneurially, but also understand that when you're communicating with your boss, that if it's a boomer that you're working with, that they're going to be looking at it through their own eyes and their own experience. What were they going through when they were in your 20s? Maybe that's a question you want to ask your mentors. What was it like starting off here? So you can understand that as they're trying to relate to you, that you're also trying to relate to them as well. Personal fulfillment came from work. They really, they questioned authority as well. You can see how different generations are really formed by the events that take place around them in their 20s. So what was going on in the 20s when boomers were turning 25, 26, 27? There's Vietnam, right? It was the 70s. There were they remember when JFK was assassinated. I mean, so there's a questioning of authority that takes place, and they're also really proud of the authority that they've earned. They're now on the top. They were questioning the man, now they are the man, and so they're kind of wanting to do things a little bit different. Next Generation X is eliminating the task. They want to etch things off the list, right? They're incredibly independent. Latchkey generation. So they're used to doing everything on their own, but they really question authority because they're saying, well, most Gen Xers really felt that push of raising themselves. They were incredibly independent. They don't like working in teams. So many of you are going to have Gen X managers who are going to delegate to you because that is how they like to be managed. So remember this, is that many managers, it's not that they don't know necessarily how to manage you, they just manage how they have been managed or how they want to be managed. So keep those open lines of communication and recognize how you like to be managed and manage up. Do that in a respectful way. Sit down with your manager and say, I realize that you really like delegating. I need just a little bit more structure, so if we could sit down once we can go over those priorities that you'd like me to have, or I really want to respect your time, and I know that you work from home part-time, but what way of communicating best works for you? And we'll talk a little bit about communication in a bit. So, and the next is millennials. We like multitasking, right? So like if I open up my computer and there's not at least like 3 different bars open, it's like I'm kind of freaking. I'm like, I'm wasting time. Like I need to be able to like be searching for something and have my Gmail open, and then also have the news open and like my Twitter feed or something. So we're constantly doing things all at the same time. If your manager walks by and he sees that you've got a bunch of different bars open, if it's a boomer, he might say, well, you're clearly not paying attention because there's no way that you can do more than one thing at once, right? So they're not necessarily going to be able to relate to the fact that that's just kind of how we work. We want to do multiple things at once. We're incredibly entrepreneurial. We're one of the most entrepreneurial generations out there. We've got 35% of millennials, or those under the age of 30, currently are owning their own business right now, and that's because we want to go out and we want to do it on our own. Many of us are finishing school and the jobs that we wanted aren't there. So we're saying, all right, I'm just going to start my own. And so take that entrepreneurial spirit and really apply it to your boss as well. Next, communication. This is the most important part that I really want each of you to grasp. Understand how to communicate across generations. One of the largest challenges that I hear when I help coach managers on how to manage millennials is they say, they're just not listening to me. How do I communicate with them? They don't know how to communicate back to me. They're disrespectful. They're not professional. So looking at how traditionalists, those that are going to be 75 and older, really prioritize formal communication, looking at memos, writing things down. Think about it. When they were in their mid-career, they didn't necessarily have the internet. Many of them might not be familiar with computers. So know that what's the best way of getting a hold of them. Sometimes it's going to be etching something out. I mean, I had someone that I worked with that it didn't matter how many emails I sent to him. It was just, I would have to write out physically on like 10 different Post-its and put it like all over his desk to get him to do anything. Or I'd have to stand over his shoulder and wait for him to make a phone call that I had requested, or to do something that I had asked. And it wasn't, me like lording over him like, oh, are you going to get this done? It was just, you had to realize that for him, he just wasn't comfortable with the computer. He was a little intimidated, honestly, using the computer, particularly around someone who's younger than him who's very familiar with it. And so that took some getting used to, and that took a lot of respect. And at first, I can tell you, I was frustrated. It was like, why don't you get these things done? Like, I sent you an email like 3 hours ago, or like an hour ago, or 10 minutes ago, and you're not responding. Because we're used to constant communication, right? Because I can pick up my phone and I can get an email. But for someone who's not familiar with that, it's going to take them a little bit longer. So be gracious, be very humble, and we're going to be talking about that is the biggest takeaway through all of this, is to be gracious and be humble, which I know each of you are. That's why you're here. So formal communication, sitting them down, making it a formal meeting, just stopping by and making something kind of flippant and not respectful probably isn't going to be as effective. Effective communication for baby boomers is in person. In person or over the phone. So if you need to sit down with your boomer boss and it's something that's serious, sit them down, say, hey, can I talk to you in 15 minutes? Or hey, do you have a second? And sit down with them and look at them face to face, looking them in the eye, showing them that you respect their time enough to sit them down, close the door, and say, I want to talk to you about something. Next is Generation X. So looking at email. I mean, I don't know how many times I'll be talking to someone who's Gen X saying, okay, that's great. Can you just email it to me? Right? Because they're incredibly independent. They're like, let me look at it on my own time, usually out of the office, or, to be able to have that kind of flexibility to respond when I need to respond. Let me think about it and let me get back to you. They're slower to respond. They're not as trigger happy, I think, as millennials. So when you're communicating to Xers, use email more. And then maybe if they're not getting back to you, then pick up the phone. But realize that that's their primary form of communication. Next is millennials. They say email, which is still true. I think most of us do appreciate email. Sometimes Facebook, but I think Facebook is kind of over. I'll sometimes have managers contact me through Facebook, and sometimes I'm just like, well, I'll respond. So here's kind of the rule of thumb. If someone responds to you with email, phone call, in person, you respond back to them in whatever form they communicated to you. So if someone is going to be that informal and say, connect with you over LinkedIn, encourage them to use email, encourage them to be more formal if you can, if it's a respectful way, but feel comfortable that if someone contacts you via email, that you can contact them back via email. But texting is usually the way that most of us, right, communicate. It's like if someone calls me on the phone, I don't ever pick up if it's a number I don't know. Does anyone else like me? I'm like, who is this person, right? Because for us, it's like our digital front door. It's like so invasive. Like the concept of someone coming to my front door and knocking on, I'm like, who is it? Like, what do they want, right? It's very invasive. So it's the same thing with a phone. It's always going to go to voicemail, and I'll check. If you don't leave a message, I'm not calling you back. I don't know who you are, right? So that's kind of our generation. Or I'll text someone back and be like, text me. Or how many of us on voicemail say, the fastest way to get a hold of me is if you send me a text message at this phone number. Does anyone else have a voicemail like that? Yeah, me neither. So looking at different ways, if you want to connect with your boss, if he says that it's okay for you to text him and you really need him really short term, then that's okay. I mean, I worked for a senator in California, and he'd be on the floor and he'd be doing a vote. And then he would say, it's okay, you can text me then. That's if I emailed him, I didn't get a hold of him, or if it was something very urgent. But I also realized that that put me in a position where I didn't look as professional. So always put yourself in the most professional field as possible. Next is feedback. And feedback is something that's really important to us as a generation, right? We want to, especially if you're somewhere short term, you're wanting probably more efficient feedback. So we're used to the Instagrams, the Twitters, the Facebook, where we get instant feedback, right? Like the selfie song. It's like, oh my gosh, that must have been a good selfie, because it's like been 2 minutes and nobody liked it, right? We're used to getting that constant feedback. So realize that not every generation is like that. For boomers, they're used to annual reviews. They just kind of slow and steady. They do the same thing, and then maybe once a year you'll have an annual review. We're not necessarily like that. And for each of you, I want you to use this as an incredible way to really hone your skills professionally. So don't be afraid to ask for feedback, but do it in a way that's respectful of their time as well. And say, just for me to do professionally what I want to get feedback from you, what's the best way of doing that? Is that okay if we go out to coffee every other weekend and just kind of informally ask you questions? Or, once a month, is it okay if we do a little bit more formal? If I have some questions that we go over, is that okay? Or if I send you the questions beforehand, is that the best use of your time? Just let me know. I want to respect your time. No one's going to be like, that is so annoying. They keep asking me if they can respect my time more. That's just terrible. No, they're going to say, wow, what a mature young woman that she respects her time and my time and wants to get the most out of this experience. So this says, sorry to interrupt, but how am I doing? That's a very Gen X way of receiving feedback. They might be more prone to ask for, they want feedback, Generation X does, and so they might even be asking for feedback from you, but they might be a little hesitant about it. So keep in mind that that boomers are used to getting that kind of feedback of I'm not really sure, but for millennials, we're really proud of getting feedback. We're I want that feedback, right? So do it in a respectful way. So we're going to briefly go over, so this last year I wrote a book. It's called 5 Millennial Myths, and it's based off of my research and my work with millennials. And yes, there are more than 5 myths that are out there about millennials, but I chose 5 that are the most popular, both in popular media as well as research and working with management as well. And so the first one is that millennials are entitled. So how many of you guys, like me, played sports and got a trophy for just showing up, right? I don't know how many. I played professional. Yeah, I wish, right? I played competitive tennis for 15 years, and so I have boxes of trophies, and I think 3 of them I really that I keep still, because those are the ones I'm proud of. Those are the ones that I worked for. That's the one that was sweat and tears, and I remember it was like a 4-hour game, and because I earned it, right? But so for many of us, we did receive recognition for just being on the team, and so many of us are coming in, and other generations look at us as entitled because we're saying, well, we expect to be recognized for just being here, right? I mean, how many of us know people, not us, obviously, is for people who passed classes in college that you're there is no way that she deserved to get the same grade as me because she was on the same team as me, right? Or there's no way that she should have passed that class when I worked really hard and I got an A and then she got a B- or a C. So realizing that as a generation, we've been very protected and we've been very blessed, but at the same time, I think that's kind of set us up for some challenge as well. So realize that other generations are looking at us and saying you're entitled. So the reality, what I do is I help spin that around and say, no, it's not that we're entitled, it's that we're ambitious. We know that we know what it's like to be a part of a team, and we realize that everybody on the team should be recognized. But we should also recognize them based off of how they're contributing as well. So realize that they're going to be looking at you thinking, oh yeah, she just thinks that she deserves a raise after being here for 6 months. Well, show them, prove to them without a shadow of a doubt that the value that you're adding deserves for you to be recognized within the office. Next, you can't tell, but the second one is that that millennials are independent, that we only want to work with ourselves and people who look like us. So like I was talking about before, if I walk into a room and everybody looks like me, I get a little freaked out, right? So the myth is that we only want to, it's like the intern culture, right? That you're only going to be hanging out with interns and you're just going to be kind of shuffling around, and you'll see that all over this town. So the myth is that we don't want to work with anyone, but the reality is that we want mentorship, right? We're all here because we want to learn from those who have gone before us. We want that power of cross generations coming together. And so bust that myth when you're at the office and show them that you're not just going to sit and hang out with your girlfriends or people who are the same age as you. Make that crossover. Take someone out to lunch. one piece of advice that I received early on in my own career was to every single month, I mean, I would say, you know, every 2 days or something, since you guys are here for a short amount of time, take someone out to lunch that inspires you. Contact them and say, hey, you know, can I take you out to lunch, or can I take you out to coffee? I take someone out to coffee that really inspires me. And your story, I just think it's really fascinating. I'd love to learn how you got there. Never once have I ever had anyone say like, no, that's terrible. I inspire you. Why? What's wrong? No, they're like, oh my gosh, what an honor. I would love to. Like, let me take you out to lunch. I'm like, yes, I didn't have to pay for lunch. This is great. So look at ways that you can then reach out, make the crossover, and look at different industries as well. Don't just look within government, but what can you learn from someone in the sports industry or the broadcast industry or the fashion industry as well? Learn from them, make those connections, and serve them as well. Next myth is that we're disloyal. So here in DC has the highest amount of millennials employed than any other metropolitan city in the United States. So 26% of the population here in DC are millennials, full-time employed. Next is New York, and then it's Boston. So this city is used to us. They're used to fresh faces. And so many of us came here and we're interns. So I think that there's an appreciation for it as well, but there's also this really fast-paced culture, and we're constantly moving on. So the average millennial will stay at her job 11 months in DC. 11 months. And that's full-time employment. Nationally, it's about 2 years, and so you can imagine here in DC, there's a little bit of hesitance when you see someone young coming in on a job, and you look at your resume, and it's like every 6 months you like jump somewhere else, right? So for us, we see that as a positive, like, look, I've got all this experience, and I'm only 22, and it's like, for a boomer, who loyalty is a big priority for them, right? They look down and they say, I'm not quite sure I'm going to hire you, because it looks like you got commitment issues. So you got to realize that pick somewhere that you really feel that you can invest yourself in, and commit yourself there as well, and bust that myth of being disloyal. Next is that we're addicted to technology, which, after I wrote my book, I was like, maybe I shouldn't have put that as a myth, because I'm pretty sure that that is a fact. I think it was like 38% of college students right now can't remember being within 10 feet of their phone. So I don't know if any of you guys are like me, like my phone's at the back of the room and I'm like kind of freaking out a little bit. It's like separation anxiety. Like we're just used to always having technology with us. But that's not a bad thing. We see technology as a way that we can improve processes. It's a way we can save money. It's a way that we can do things more efficiently and that we can do things better as well. And so realize that other generations are going to be coming to you and they're going to be looking at you like, why are you always on your phone? Well, maybe help them see that, oh, I'm actually texting someone in another office and we're coordinating on this lunch meeting, and so we're going to get together and we're going to do, I'm G-chatting someone right now, but we're actually working on this one policy brief, and I just wanted to get her input. Or we're meeting up to go to this one policy briefing. So help them understand why you're using technology. That technology is a positive thing, but if someone just walks by your desk, they might see you, on your phone. And if you're using it for work, well, number one, only use it for work. Let me just clarify. I'm not saying that it's okay for you to be using like G-chat and Facebook at work. Please do not. Technology is something that should be used to improve the process, but be respectful of the time that you're actually in the office and really concentrate on that as well. So, but use it as a way to constantly be connected with others. That's really why we're so drawn to technology. We want to be connected with others. And the next one is that, I should say finally, the final myth is that we're unmotivated. And I hear it all the time. I was just talking to some managers this morning, and they were saying, I am so frustrated with this generation. It seems like nothing I do makes them want to stay, after them more money and more flexibility, and they can do whatever they want. Why can't I get you guys to be motivated? And I just sit them down and I just clearly say, it's not money that motivates us. I mean, each of you guys are interns. We all realize that you have to pay your dues to actually start making something. We don't really care as much about that. What we care about is the mission of the organization. We care about making a difference. So each of you are here because you want to make a difference, right? You want to do something great with your lives. You believe that you have something that only you can say. You want to contribute to something. You want to make the world a better place. And so communicate that. Say, help me be able to really apply my passions and my skills at this job. So we're a Renaissance generation. We have so many talents, so many skills. I'm sure many of you are painters, photographers, event planners, website designers, fashion designers. I mean, you're not just one type of person. You're not just defined by your interest in your passion in politics. There's really so much to you. You're dynamic. So apply that at work. Help your your employer be able to see how they can apply your passions to even save money at the office. I really encourage people to look out into their employee workforce and say, how can we make this better? How can we find the hidden talent within our generation to be able to do well, to really get the edge on the competition, to really be able to think creatively, crowdsource on different projects and bring in different skill sets that weren't necessarily included before. So here are my takeaways, and we can go into questions after that. So how do you manage the myths? Here are some practical takeaways. The first thing is use your youth to your advantage. So use the fact that you are young. Everyone in this town has been an intern at some point. Use that to your advantage and say, hey, I know that you were an intern at one point. What is the one thing that you wish that you would have known when you were my age? And how can you help me be able to avoid some of the mistakes that you've made in the past? I really want to be successful, and I respect what it is that you've done. Help me be able to learn from you. That's a really great way to be able to position yourself. I think there was a question earlier about asking too many questions, and I experienced that a lot. As interns, we might say, oh, well, I've got a lot of questions, I'm not sure how to do any of this, but I thought that was a great suggestion. Respect their time, have a list, but one of the things I really encourage young people to do is to try it out on your own first. Be able to apply the entrepreneurialism. Don't be afraid to ask for help, but try it on your own first, because as a manager, if your intern is coming to you every 10 minutes or even every day with like little tiny task questions, it really nags on them. And so you want to be able to have that open conversation because you want them to be assured that they can trust you, right? Asking questions is good, clarifying questions is good, points of direction is good, but respect their time as well. So next, don't act your age. So be mature. I know you ladies are mature. You all look very mature. You all look very professional as well. So don't act your age. Don't be really loud when you're walking around the Capitol. I'm sure we're going to be talking about later about, not disclosing information about your boss when you're outside of the office. So don't act like, the 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old women, I don't know how old you are, out there. Just be respectful, be mature, and really wow them and impress them. Take that challenge on yourself. Say, you know what, I'm going to be the best intern you've ever had. Watch me. Watch me be the best intern that you've ever had, because I want to serve you guys. I want to impress you, and I really believe in the mission of the organization, and that's what I want to do. So take that upon yourself. Next is clean up your act. And by that I mean your digital act, your technology, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I think many of us think, oh, if my LinkedIn is professional, then that's fine. It's okay. Then I don't have to worry about my Facebook. But the reality is that employers are now going online and they're looking at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and they're looking at that in the interview process. I've had heads of hiring departments here within the city of major nonprofit organizations who have said, yep, can't hire that person. I'm sorry, I went on their Facebook. That's not a representation of who we are as an organization. And I just can't have that out there. So realize that you're an ambassador for the organization as well, particularly if you're putting your employment on your social media site as well. And I know on Twitter, a lot of us will say, these tweets are not my own, but make sure that you know that you are constantly representing who you're with. When you're walking down the street, when you're with your friends, in this town, you will realize it's a very small town. It's a big town, but it's a small town. You'll run into people a lot. So on Metro, when you're walking with your friends, realize that people are around you and people are listening as well. Be bold, but be humble. So like I said, humility and teachability are the most important things that you can really draw away from. So oftentimes when I encourage individuals as they're interviewing for jobs, I say, when they say, well, what's your biggest strength? I would say, I'm teachable. Because I can teach you skills, I can teach you how to do something, I can't teach you to be humble, and I can't teach you to be teachable. So say, I might not necessarily have all the skills right now, but I'm willing to learn, and I want to learn, and I'm humble. Well, I wouldn't say like I'm humble, or like, I'm the most humble person that you've ever met, right? It's just, don't go there. So be professionally you, like I mentioned before, break away from the pack. So make yourself stand out. Show them that you deserve to be here. Make them be begging for you to come back next semester or next summer. Put in that great impression. Look at it as a long-term investment. I don't know how many relationships I still have with those that have employed me to years and years ago. I mean, I'm from California, but I still keep in very close contact. I was just out there a couple weeks ago visiting with someone who was my first intern manager, and we still have a wonderful relationship. We're friends now. But that's because we built that rapport, and it wasn't just, I'm checking this off the list or putting it on my resume, or I just want you as a professional reference. I truly cared about that relationship, so keep that in mind. Reverse mentor. So that's an opportunity for you to serve those of different generations within your office. Be that problem solver. Find new ways of using technology. Maybe you're seeing that they're struggling with, setting up their Wi-Fi at home. See if there's a way that you could, help them with something. Or one mentor of mine, I was helping her paint her bathroom a couple weeks ago. And then she helped get me a couple clients. And it was just through this conversation. It's very organic. It's relationships are messy, and it's not quid pro quo. It's something that you just build over time. So find ways that you can really bless and honor those of other generations, and you'd be amazed with what you can do. And then finally, remember you aren't too good for a task. So if someone asks you to do something, be I'm in college and I don't do that, or I have my master's degree, and I really, there's this joke about me and my friends, is if I can't do something, it's I have my master's, but I can't figure this out. I'm building a shelf the other day for my can. I couldn't figure it out. And my friend's well, you have your master's, Gabrielle. You should figure this out. I'm it's political science, not actual science, so that doesn't count. Duh. But remember that you're not too good for anything. You are here for a reason. You're here to learn, and be that sponge that's constantly absorbing things, and do things with joy. I don't know how many interns that I've had where I'm giving them something, they're oh, what, shouldn't someone else do this? Or a new hire I've brought on, they're well, shouldn't we have an intern do this? I'm no, it was part of your job description that we're working on this together. You're not too good for anything. And that's something that's really going to prove you to really excel, not only in this position, but those in the future. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to open it up for questions if we have time. I know
we can do
a couple of questions. If you guys have them, I'd love to be able to answer them for you.
Not all at once. Do you have a question? Okay.
You talked a lot about working with different generations. How did you get so good at working with different generations? And do you think your experience with that is going to be a lot different than ours? I know we're in the same generation, but you are a few years older than most of us.
Well, I think that it's a constant challenge. How I've been effective at working with generations is just being aware of the different generations. I think that that's one of the most important things, is you can recognize that. So saying I realize that different generations have different priorities and different processes and different ways of communicating, and I recognize that. I'm not going into a work environment that I expect everybody's going to talk like me or act like me or be even responding to the same kind of terms as me. So I want to learn how to effectively do that. So I think that that's one way that I've been able to be effective, and I think that your experience is going to be similar. I mean, what's different, I think, so Generation Y, or also Millennials, it's synonymous. They're also talking about how your generation, your end of the generation, is called Generation IY. So they're saying you guys are even more different than my generation, or part of my generation. And so part of that is it's very service oriented with your generation, and then also heightened sense of technology and using it for different things as well. So that might be something that's a little bit different than your experience, but I think for the most part, many of you are, I just really encourage each of you to be as personable as possible and as personal as possible, to really draw away from just that constant communication via technology. Use it as a means to an end. Get in front of people as much as you possibly can, because I don't know how many people that I've met at networking events, and they're oh, I met you on Facebook, or I'm friends with you on Facebook, or I think I saw you on LinkedIn. But because as soon as I made that personal contact, that's when the relationship was really built, and that's where things were really progressing. But there's really only so much that technology can do, and so that's something that I would really encourage each of you guys to utilize as well.
Yeah, here, I was gonna say I'm not that far from you. Okay, so that was very insightful and very helpful. One thing that you talked about was kind of the difference between having one job for a long time or moving through different jobs. And I was just wondering if you thought that one looks more valuable than another. I know you said it's different between generations, or is it more about selling whatever you have? I was just wondering.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I'm going to give you the lawyer's answer and say that it depends. But I can tell you that managers of boomer generations will look out and say, yeah, I'm not really sure. She's had like 6 different jobs and she's 25. I'm a little concerned about that. Does that mean that it also depends on the kind of jobs that you've had? So say there are like internships or there are campaigns where the nature of the job is short term. I think it's a little bit more concerning if you worked at different corporations for short term, because you're saying, oh, well, you're just jumping in and jumping out. If you do find yourself in that situation, because I also don't think that you should be at a job that you're not happy, that you're not learning, that you're not being challenged. I don't think you should be staying there. I think that you should go on with expectations that hard work is hard work. I mean, I remember my first job out of college, I was working at a political consulting firm, and I thought that I was going to be working directly with my client. And I mean, I was 21 years old, so I don't know who in their right mind would even let me do what I did. But I remember walking in and I thought that, they're like, oh, right, here's your office, Gabrielle. And I walk in and they open up the door and like this overwhelming fume of like Clarisol and like, not Clarisol, that's that face wash stuff, Clorox bleach and all this like comes, and there was like a cleaning closet that they cleaned out and like given to me. So like I'm like my brain cells are dying as I'm sitting there working for 6 months, and it's not what I thought that it was going to be. And I ended up being there for 9 months. And my next employer looked at me and said, well, you've only been at that last job for 9 months. Why should I bring you on? And I explained the nature of the position. It was political consulting. I stayed on with my candidate all the way through the election, and then I was looking for alternative opportunities and really wanted to grow. And I drew on that experience as saying, yes, I did political consulting, but my next job was actually working for the government. And I said, I now want to communicate. I understand how people get elected to office, but now I want to serve them as they're actually in office. So with everything, know that your career builds on each other. But I would encourage you to take mind to your resume, and knowing that if someone, especially with the job market as it is, if you just send in your resume and it just looks like, someone just like threw a bunch of internships on the ground and then, there wasn't structure to it, it's not going to make you as competitive as if you've been somewhere for a year or for 2 years. It's really that 2-year mark that employers and HR professionals are looking at. Can you stay somewhere for 2 years? Because after 2 years, they can say, okay, well, I can draw it. I can keep them long term. Maybe I can shift them around. Maybe I can have them grow professionally within the organization. But anything less than 2 years is going to be a challenge for you.
Is there any more questions? Awesome.
Well, thank you very much. And good luck, everyone.